Welcome to Getting to Know You, residents and staff here at Stonebridge. We're going to take this session as an opportunity to think about Father's Day. Maybe it's really not as important in our whole society, and that may be because it came after Mother's Day. Apparently, Father's Day got started by a woman who was listening to a Mother's Day sermon and thought, my heavens, there should be a Father's Day. Nothing much happened at the turn of the century when that happened, until 1924 when President Harding said, I think it would be a good idea to have a Father's Day. But it took Nixon to make it actually happen in 1956, and this third Sunday in June is now Father's Day. So I'm very pleased that we have 3 residents here at Stonebridge to help you think about Father's Day, and they're going to tell you a bit about their fathers, and we hope that you will participate in the same way in your head, or maybe a conversation at dinner about appreciating fathers. Sitting here with me at the end is Ken Young, and he's known mainly as the chair of the community gardens, except there isn't any committee for him to chair. But that's what he's called. And then I have Claude Fraser here with me, and what I think about Claude is that he plays tennis all the time and has coached it and really seems to love it. And I guess we'd see him if we had a tennis court, but one of those things. And sitting next to me is Sandy Hyatt. And Sandy, this is a way of paying tribute to you, to being one of the pioneers with Getting to Know You.
Well, thank you.
When we first started, you were our everything person when the only camera we had was a little phone.
Right.
So I've asked each of the fathers who were here with us today to do 2 things, is to give us a little idea who their father was. Who was this person? And maybe you would think that about your father. And then we'll do another round, and we'll sort of a snapshot of what's a memory that you have, what's something that sticks in your head about your father. So Sandy, since you're sitting next to me, why don't you go first?
My dad came from St. Louis, Missouri, and spent some time in Memphis, Tennessee. And as I said to him when I was older, and you then luckily came to New Jersey where you met my mother, and then we're married. He came here because he had relatives in New Jersey, and he was in the food serving business, but he was really working in an office. And as you see the picture, you know, this was a picture of my mom and dad before they were married, when they were engaged, and that was about 1922. Funny story is, I was born almost 11 years after they got married, and I had the reputation of being born in the middle of the Depression, so I was possibly a mistake. Okay, my dad was very active in politics.
Oh.
He was chairman of a committee. We lived in Newark, New Jersey, and he was in charge of a Democratic committee that dealt in the south side of town. And he felt very, very strongly about voting for parties, even though he was the head of a party. My dad installed in me and my older brother the fact that if you like a particular person running for an office, do as much research on that person as you can, and then come talk to me. And
sounds like a good political leader.
Yeah, he was. Other things were too, but I'll have a chance to tell you what I felt were the couple of important things that he did to me after my colleagues here have given their beginning.
Okay. Claude, you want to say something about your dad, where he came from?
My father was born in Berlin, Germany in 1911, and came of age during the chaotic period between the 2 wars. In the 20s, Berlin was a very, very active town. There were a lot of things going on. There was some people actually called it a decadent time for the city, but it was a lot alive, and a lot of things were going on. And met my mother in the 1930, and they were married within 4 months of the time they were meeting, and my father was previously engaged to a young lady in England where he worked or served an apprenticeship. But when he met my mother, that all came to an end, and the result was that they got married.
Did they tell that story?
Did they tell that story? Yes, oh yeah.
Okay.
And ultimately we wound up through a whole bunch of circumstances, not the least of which was the fact that the Nazis came to power in '33. And we wound up here in the States, and my father got into the field. He became a commodity broker in an international trade. Ultimately wound up doing a lot of traveling in his business. That field is now really dead with the internet. You don't need a broker anymore to handle transactions between India and here. He became the first trader to be the president of the American Spice Trade Association. He was a member of the American Arbitration Association and was a consultant and adjudicated many cases in the same field that he was in, and had a very interesting career. Was particularly interesting because he grew up and I grew up in totally different environments. I was born in Berlin, but I was raised here in the States. And so we had very little in common that we could transfer to one another. And my closest relationship with him occurred after I served in the Air Force and came back and tried to develop a career of my own. And we often met in New York and had great dinners together, and father-son dinners, and that was very good.
Does the picture cabaret actually convey that period of time?
It does convey it very accurately.
Oh, okay.
And yes, that was,
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah.
So let me turn to you, Ken.
Well, my story is a bit different. My father was the youngest of 10 children of a tenant farmer in Ayrshire in southern Scotland. And he was a very bright kid. And he went to Glasgow University on the strength of a scholarship on mathematics from Kilmarnock Academy. And he joined Glasgow University on October of 1914, and he volunteered for the First World War in November of 1914. And he went off to the army with a man called Kenneth Moore, after whom I am named. And the difference, unfortunately for them, was that within the first year, Kenneth Moore was dead, and my father went on to become an officer. And at the end of the war, he was the lieutenant colonel in the 1st Battalion of the Black Watch Regiment. He then returned to Glasgow University, but the war had really dramatically affected him because he took up medicine. And in fact graduated from Glasgow University very successfully. And he became a pathologist. And his first job was at the University of Leeds in England, where he met my mother. And they got married shortly after. And then finally he moved to the University of Aberdeen, where he became the professor of pathology and was the pathologist for the town, essentially. I think perhaps the most important thing about the war, this of course is now the Second World War, was that not only did he do his normal work duties, but he also was the head of the medical branch of the Home Guard in Aberdeen, and also was training lots of doctors for the needs for the Second World War. I think that's okay for now.
Yeah. Was pathology a new field?
No, I think that the studies it really is the study of disease. And I remember well the University Museum, Pathology Museum, which was quite incredible with all these hearts and lungs and various things which had been decayed because of some particular disease.
So he was sort of, it would sound like he was sort of trying to figure out what was going on with
Actually,
people and disease and so
Yeah.
on.
His actual line of research was very interesting because he used lots of models, but his interest there was how did cancer transfer from one part of the body to another. This was, he had all these gelatine models with cells and things with little red beads moving around, which I was always fascinated to look at.
I guess we still haven't solved that problem.
Well, I think maybe it's the equipment to do better is there now.
But it's interesting that your father came home in a sense to Scotland to do his work. Your father left completely. And how about yours, Sandy? Did he stay in Newark and continue to?
He did. I didn't tell at the beginning. My father joined the Army when he was 16 because he got his mother to sign, and he felt that, since he was here in America and he had gone to school as a teenager in not in Germany but in Austria, so he spoke a foreign language, and when they took him in the Army, he looked like he was 15 years old, and I asked him what he did that was important, and he said, I went to get coffee every morning for everyone. He was in Camp Kilmer. I said, that's all you did? He says, no. In the afternoon, I did translation from German into English. Okay. I was very proud of him. I found out later on, when I was older, that he had formed a group in Newark that were a Friday dinner group, it was called. And these men were not known by name, but provided food for people, and there were people who couldn't afford 3 meals a day at the time. And this was something that he handled himself. And his philosophy to me when he was older, and my dad was 44 when I was born, so he was a lot older than many people. And he said, we pass this way only once, and all we can do for other people, we should really not discuss what honors we're getting for this, but that just provide this stuff. And the very strong thing that he put on me was that, and I remember this many, many times, if you have an appointment and an opportunity for a job or for school or whatever you're doing, and your appointment is at 9 o'clock, and if you're not there at 8:45, you should consider yourself late. Unfortunately, now when I got older and became in a position like that, when I worked, the younger people didn't, they came out with stories like the dog ate my paper and things like that. Okay, I was very proud of him for that.
But you still remember that?
I still remember.
You show up early for bocce.
I am early. Yes, I am early.
Claude, when you were thinking about your father making this transition, how did he get acclimated to the United States? How did he learn English?
Well, fortunately, he spoke English
Before.
very well, which he learned while he was in England.
Oh, it
And
was time in England.
he was very much an Anglophile, and I think of him often. He was very much taken by the Edwardians of that period.
Did he dress that way?
Yes, he learned. He became a meticulous dresser and passed down to me what is considered what kind of shirt you should buy, ties that go with the jackets and so on. So he made me very clothes conscious. On the other hand, he took a lot of guts, I think, on his part. He took me to my first professional baseball game. at Ebbets Field.
Did he know about
He
the
knew
game?
nothing
Oh.
about the game. I had fallen in love with the game,
Uh-huh.
and I knew everything about the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great year because Jackie Robinson broke in that year. It was just a very momentous year. And around that, there's a tale to be told, which was very embarrassing to me. I don't think it was for him. There was a father-son softball game at our church.
Okay, I think I hear something coming here.
They didn't know where to put my father in the field, so they put him in the outfield. And lo and behold, I had a vision of this, and it happened. Somebody hit a fly ball to the outfield where he was playing, and instead of the usual procedure of camping yourself underneath it and catching it, he stood in front, let the ball drop, and with his foot, he tried to stop it from going beyond him. I just kind of cringed at that point. I was so embarrassed because of, what was I, 11, 12 years old?
Yeah.
And that's an event that I don't think I'll ever forget.
I think every child of immigrants probably has some story like that.
Yeah.
I know I do. Both of my parents were immigrants, and it was hard sometimes to explain. So Ken, what do you remember? Do you remember your father coming home in a way, and your home being in Aberdeen again?
Well, no, of course, he came home long before I was born.
Okay.
I was born late in the Depression, but in Aberdeen that was not such and it hadn't got the same impact as it had in most places. My main memories are of the Second World War of him, because he built a shelter, an air raid shelter in our garden. I should explain that in the war, Norway is a good bit closer to Aberdeen, and when the Germans took over Norway, then we got bombing raids across.
We should have a map.
Because the harbour and the fishing fleet and the paper mills were a useful target for the Germans. But he used to carry me down to the shelter when the siren went off. And most nights I stayed sound asleep, both going down to the shelter and back up again. But some nights, just when I would wake up and be really comforted to feel that I was being looked after and carried. My two brothers, who were older than me, both had to walk down. And various other things that he did during the war. I mean, he was extremely well organized, and some nights, of course, he was out on the home guard duty. But he worked every day of the week, plus Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. And the afternoons on Saturday was given over to golf, and the one on Sunday was given over to the family. So we used to have a great time. And one of the small things that we did was we used to go walk up, the three boys used to walk up to the hospital and the medical school where he was working. And we always had to stop at the hospital porter's lodge to pick up the Sunday newspapers. And I never knew why he got his Sunday newspapers there, but we were always required to pick them up. And then he would drive us home. Being a doctor, he had plenty of rationing with petrol, so or gasoline, I should say. Yeah.
No, that's okay.
But that was one thing, but he was always there for me. The one thing I sort of still am unhappy about is that he would not talk about the war. And he had a dreadful scar on his leg from a shrapnel wound, and he never ever told any of us how he got it. And that was just really somehow, I think, like most soldiers who've seen awful things, they just don't want to talk about it.
I think
But
so.
the one later thing in our life is that when I was 17, I really hated school. And I came home for the Christmas holiday, and I told him that I wanted to leave school and go and do an apprenticeship. And he sort of looked at me and he sighed. And then he said, "Can I make a bargain with you?" And I said, "Well, yes." He said, will you stay on at school and finish your university qualifying exams? And if you do that, then you can go off and do anything you like. And I did it and decided that university was worth going to. So he got it precisely what he wanted out of the bargain.
And did you?
I think so.
Well, it would be lovely just to continue this, but I think the whole purpose was to have people here at Stonebridge think with you about what it means to have a father and what that person is like and what the experiences you had with that person, and appreciate them on Father's Day. It's coming up on Sunday. You're doing this on Wednesday. So I want to thank the three of you, and I'm moved by your remembrances of your father. And I think we should remember that there probably are very touching moments and beautiful moments that we should think about when we think about our father. So I hope you got some value on hearing these stories, and that you too will remember your dad this coming Sunday.